Okay. Did everyone hear that? Recording in progress. Okay. In any event, okay. This week's Torah reading is the section, very interesting section, called Ba'aloischa. Well, what it really is, the beginning part of it anyway, the beginning part of it is all about the menorah, the candelabra that was actually lit in the tabernacle and subsequently in the temple. Yeah, sure, Dennis, of course. That was lit in the temple. And first in the tabernacle, then in the temple. But the menorah, as it's called, the menorah is a very vital part of the furnishings, or the vessels, as they are properly called, in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and subsequently in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. It was placed in. There were three areas really in the temple area. There was the Holy of Holies. Then that was where the Ark was. Then there was the Holy, which is outside of that, and that is where the menorah was placed. And there was also an altar there, which was an incense altar. But the menorah was there. That was in the Holy, in the second holiest area of the temple. But this week's section deals with the construction of the menorah and a couple of other fascinating ideas. And as usual, we will try and pick them apart and understand what it means to us individually. So, one of the I think for this, actually, I'm going to show you some of the verses because you'll see it better that way. Now, I know the verses are going to be in Hebrew. Don't worry, I am going to translate everything. I don't always show you the verses in Hebrew, as you know, but it's important from this point of view that the verses tell us, they sort of focusing on certain words that are important. So I will translate it. Just the first verse reads as follows. Moses is told, God tells Moses, that's the first verse, speak to Aaron, Daber el Aharon, speak to Aaron, V'amarta elav, and say to him, Maha'alotcha et hanerot, when you kindle the candles. Now the word over here, this word Ba'alotcha, that word that's highlighted now, Ba'alotcha, which is usually translated as when you kindle, it actually means, it's from the word aliyah, which means to go up. As some of you might know, when you go up to Israel, that's called aliyah. When people make Israel their home, that's called making aliyah. But in any event, the word aliyah means to go up, to rise up, to go up to a higher level. So he says, when you raise up the candles, not simply when you light them, but when you raise them up, and I'm going to focus on this concept quite a lot tonight, when you raise up the candles, the candles have to burn towards, they have to face towards, the wicks, in other words, have to face towards the center of the candelabrum. There's various reasons for this. The simple reason that's given is that people shouldn't think that God needs the light. This was really well, we'll see what it was all about and why it was done. But in any event, they had to all face the candles had to face the central column, and we'll speak about that more later on. And then comes another verse that says, "Vayas Cain Aharon," and Aaron did so. Vayas Cain Aharon, Aaron did so. And he lit the candelabra, and so on and so forth, and as God commanded Moses. Now the third verse, there are three verses that are important over here, and I'm going to show you why. And this is how the menorah was done. Miksha zahav. It was hammered out gold. It wasn't gold that was poured into a cast of some sort, into a form or a shape, but it was actually a block of gold that was hammered out to form the shape of the menorah. This word over here is the critical word. This word miksha, again, the commentaries come up. The word miksha is the important word over here, hammered out. That's what the literal translation is. We're going to look at non-literal translations of all of these things. Okay, so let's go back now and understand what is going on. Now, when Moses tells Aaron to light the menorah, so he gives him over God's command that he has to light this candelabra. It says that Moses was troubled by this idea to the extent that he didn't understand what it was that how he was supposed to construct the menorah. When it says that the word, it says to go back again, I'm sorry, I should have just kept it there on the share screen for a minute. When it says that the menorah was miksha, right? Miksha, this is the word over here, miksha, which we translated as hammered out gold. So our sages say, and the same word over here, miksha, right? It's repeated twice actually. When the sages explaining this word say that Moses had a kushia, he found it difficult. The word kasher in Hebrew also means difficult and means a question. He had a question, he didn't understand. What was so difficult to understand more here than anywhere else? All of the vessels in the temple were somewhat complicated, and the menorah was no more complicated than anything else. Why was it then that he had this question? What was this all about? So in order to be able to understand that, we first have to understand the idea that when all of the tabernacle was constructed, it was constructed in such a way that it mirrored the creation. It mirrored the creation. The creation was created, if you have a look at the beginning of Genesis, the first chapter of Genesis, it says in the first chapter of Genesis, and God said there shall be light, and there was light, and God said there shall be a firmament to separate between the heavens and the earth, and so on and so forth. And there shall be grasses and trees and animals and man, and so on and so forth. All of them begin with the expression, and God said. And then they conclude with, and it was so. Vayihi chen. Vayomer Elokim, vayihi chen. And God said, and so it was. Okay. Now this is repeated 9 times. That's repeated 9 times. Now, the sages tell us that there were 10 utterances through which the world was created. The world was created through 10 utterances. Now, what are these utterances? Obviously, when we talk about an utterance in human terminology, we mean a short statement, an utterance. He said such and such and such, whatever it was, that's the utterance. Here, we cannot really be talking about that, but what we are talking, because we're talking about God, and we're using human language, the Torah always uses human language to convey an idea, because that's the language that we know. But it goes much deeper than just simply the idea of God spoke and the world came into being. That is true, but what does it mean that God spoke? So here we have a number of different explanations which are brought in Kabbalah. The explanation is basically that the creation comes about through certain permutations of divine powers. In other words, just as you have, let's say, and I think I've mentioned this before in various classes, just as you have a human organism, the human DNA. The human DNA is a certain sequence of I guess, I don't think say chromosomes or whatever. Yeah, human DNA, a certain sequence of chromosomes joined together. Interestingly enough, I just read something, this is just a diversion, but it's an important diversion, so I'll divert anyway. I just read an article that was written by a professor of microbiology, and he said something that I've actually never heard before, which I found actually quite fascinating. The human chromosome is actually there's two strands in the human chromosome. Now, when I draw them like this, don't get upset. They're interwoven sort of strands. They don't really look like that, but whatever. But the connections between these strands happen there's two strands which are identical of the human DNA, and they are joined together in clusters. There's various clusters in which they join together. So the first cluster is actually 10. There are 10 bridges, I think they call them, right? Those 10 bridges that connect they may establish the first connection between the two strands of DNA. The two identical strands, and they're connected by 10 bridges there. And then they're connected by another 5 bridges somewhere further on, another 5. And then they're connected by another 6 bridges further down. And then finally, they're connected by another 5 bridges. Does anyone recognize this? Right, in Hebrew, this would be the divine name that expresses transcendence, right? Yud Kei Vav Kei. That is the divine name that is used right throughout the Torah to express God's transcendence. So that's actually found in human DNA, which I found quite fascinating, actually. Nothing to do with what we're talking about, but in any event, that is that's an interesting thing to point out. But what is important is that everything has its sort of, let's call it its algorithm. Its algorithm comprised of certain divine forces, which brings this thing into being and keeps it in existence. And this is called the divine utterance. Now, obviously, the general utterance that created all plant life is not specific to one particular plant. It's general to all plants in general. And obviously from there, specific plants have their own particular permutation that derives from the original, let's call it the original algorithm. I did not hear your amazed utterance, no, Karen. Yeah, it is, it's pretty amazing. I must admit, when I heard it, I was like stunned, it was like my mouth was hanging open for about 5 minutes. I'll be honest with you, pretty stunning. In any event, so everything has its permutation of letters. When Bezalel, who was the one that built the tabernacle, he built it according to the 10 utterances. The vessels that there were in the temple corresponded to the 10 utterances. The general structure corresponds to the 4 worlds, the 4 spiritual, or actually the 5 spiritual worlds that there are in Kabbalah. Why I say 4 is because there's 4 manifested worlds and 1 transcendent world. These worlds are called from the bottom up: the world of Asiyah, the world of Yetzirah, the world of Bria, the world of Atzilut, and then the world that contains them all, the world of Adam Kadmon is what it's called, the world of Akko, Adam Kadmon. So, by the way, if anyone is interested in getting a copy of that article, just let me know and I will send it. I can send it to your email. I hope my wife can find it. In any event, so when Bezalel built the vessels of the temple, he built it according to, our sages tell us. Even Rashi, the classical commentator, actually brings this down from the rabbis, that when he constructed the tabernacle, he constructed it according to the way God constructed the heavens and earth. In other words, according to the 10 utterances. Now, if you count them up, there's 9 utterances that say, and God said, and end off with, and so it was. And God said, ... and so it was. Vayomer Elokim, to say it in the Hebrew, Vayomer Elokim, ... Vayehi Chen. God said, ... and so it was. But there's only 9 utterances. What happened to the 10th utterance? So the sages explain that the very first word of the Torah, the very first word of Genesis, is also an utterance. The word Bereshit, Nami Ma'amarhu, is also one of the utterances Only what? There's a difference. There's two differences between that utterance and all the others. The first one is that it doesn't say God said Bereshit. God said there shall begin, or there shall be a beginning. And it doesn't say afterwards, Vayichein, and so it was. Why is that the case? That is the case because, if all of you would just send me an email about the article, because I'm not going to remember who asked for it and who didn't. So just if you don't mind sending me kabbalahdecoded@gmail.com, and I will send you a copy of the article. Yeah, fascinating article, in fact. Okay, so the first utterance, the word Bereshit, is different from all the others, and the reason that it's different from all the others is because it's a transcendent utterance. What does it mean by transcendent utterance? We could explain it like this: that if an utterance, in the analogy, the way in human terminology, is what comes out of your mouth, the transcendent utterance is what remains in your mind, right? In other words, it remains in thought. The other utterances are in speech, so to speak. In other words, they're actually manifested in speech. But the first one, Bereshit, remains in thought. It remains in a state of thought. Now we can understand why it was that Moses found it difficult to understand the Menorah, to understand the Candelabra, because our sages explain that the vessel that corresponded to that word Bereshit was the Menorah. That was the Menorah, and that's why Moses had so much difficulty in understanding it. What was his difficulty? Because it remained in thought and it wasn't manifested. So the way things are in thought is going to be very different from the way they are in practicality, in reality. So how did he figure it out? Because our sages tell us that God showed him the image of a menorah in fire. He showed him the image of a menorah in fire. From that, Moses understood. In other words, he could see it the way it is in its original form, and then he was able to bring it down into manifestation in a block of gold, out of a block of gold down on the physical plane. But I would like to take this a step further. The 10 utterances through which the world was created and the 10 vessels that corresponded to them in the tabernacle are actually on two different planes of existence. The utterances through which the world was created, divine utterances, are nevertheless divine utterances that are manifested on the physical plane, on the level of the lowest level of the world of Asiya, the world of Asiya. In other words, the final and lowest world. The tabernacle actually represented the way things are in the world of Atzilut, in a much higher world, in a world that is 3 levels removed from the world of Asiya. So therefore, it's a much, much higher level. Now, in order to be able to understand what this higher level is, we have to go back to the word, the first word of the Torah, which is the word Bereshit. Let me see. All right, I'll write it out write it out. Let's see, we have to erase all this here. Clear all drawings, there we go. Okay, so here I'm going to write the word Bereshit. I'm going to write it in script, right? That's the bet of Bereshit. And then there's the Resh. And then there's the Aleph. All right. And then what's called the Shin. The Shin. Yud. And the Taf. Right? These are the letters of the word Bereshit, Genesis. The first word in Genesis. in the beginning. Now, our sages say that the word beginning is actually the word Reshit. Bereshit just says in the beginning, right? That's usually the way it's translated. But the Zohar points out, the Zohar and subsequently other Kabbalistic works, that the letter Bet is actually the second letter of the alphabet. And since every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value, the numerical value of Aleph is 1. The numerical value of Bet is 2, right? 2. So therefore, say the sages, there's actually 2 beginnings. There are 2 beginnings. There's not just one beginning. There are 2 beginnings. What are these 2 beginnings? The 2 beginnings are the Torah and the soul, right? The Torah and the soul, the neshama, as it's called. In Beit Reshit means, therefore, there are 2 beginnings. For the sake of 2 things, the worlds were created. For the sake of the Torah and for the sake of the neshama. The neshama, you could call it, on its highest level, it's God consciousness. Right? The world was created in order for us to be able to come, even in a physical world, to consciousness of the divine, to divine consciousness. Right? That's what the soul is all about. Now, there's different levels of soul. I don't want to go into that right now. Maybe we'll get to it soon. But nevertheless, there were 2 purposes for which all of this was created. So when Moses had difficulty, when Moshe had difficulty understanding how Breshit would be manifested in the Menorah, and he had to be shown the Menorah, it wasn't only the Menorah that he had difficulty with. He actually had difficulty with these other 2 concepts as well. In other words, how are those things going to manifest? Now, since we'd already been given, by this time, by the time the tabernacle was built, we'd already been given the Torah, so that wasn't such an issue, right? That wasn't such an issue. The Torah itself wasn't an issue because it had already been given, and we knew that by studying the permutations and the numerical values, and there's all kinds of different ways of interpreting the texts, whether it's the Kabbalistic way or whether it's the simple translation, the simple understanding of the words called pshat, or whether it hints to deeper things but doesn't necessarily get into them, for instance, gematria, numerical values, or whether it's homiletical interpretations called drash, or whether it's a secret interpretation called sword. Those are the 4 main levels of interpretation of the Torah, called the pardes of the Torah, if anyone wants to, if anyone reads Hebrew. So that's called pardes, which stands for pshat, right? Pshat, the simple, remez, drash, and sod, right? Sod, the secrets of the Torah, drash, the homiletical, remez is things that are hinted to, pshat, the simple. But that spells the word pardes, which means an orchard, right? The orchard of the Torah. This is the orchard of the Torah, where there's 4 levels of interpretation, where it says, when the sages entered the orchard, that's what it means. They didn't go into an orchard. They went into the Garden of Eden, meaning they went through all the levels of interpretation, all the levels of understanding, until they came to the core, to the essence, which essentially the essence of the Torah is really God. That's what it is. When it says that Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. So our sages explain, Anochi Misha Anochi, I am who I am, and I put myself in the Torah. Anochi is Ana Nafshik Savi Sehavit. I gave myself. The word Anochi, we're getting into a lot of, we don't usually get into this, so those who are getting confused by all this Hebrew writing and stuff, this is not the usual way we get into it. In any event, the word Anochi means Ana Nafshik Savi Sahavis. I gave myself in writing. The first word of the 10 Commandments, therefore, tells us what the 10 Commandments are all about, what the giving of the Torah was all about. I gave you myself. That's what I gave you. When I gave you the Torah, I didn't give you a book. I didn't give you a history book. I didn't give you a book of laws. I gave you a book of me, right? That's what God says to us. I gave you myself. That's the way the sages understand what the Torah is all about. So therefore, the thing that Moses found difficult, besides the menorah, which he was then shown a likeness of in fire, what he had difficulty then was with the soul. The Torah was already somewhat, it was given already. But the soul is what he had, the neshama, consciousness, is what he had difficulty understanding. How does this consciousness, how is it able to be, how is it going to be able, a person going to be able to come to an awareness, a consciousness of God constantly? How's he going to be able to come to that? He, she. How's that going to be possible? The menorah actually represents that idea as well. It's the idea of the light of the soul. In fact, about the menorah, it says as follows, the menorah, the candelabra, it says, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. God's candle is man's soul. In other words, God's candle to light up the world is man's soul. So Moses finds it difficult to understand how is it possibly going to be that the soul is going to light up the world. Why? Because the soul comes down into a physical body. It goes through a process of constriction until it is, so to speak, blown into, God blew into the nostrils of Adam. He blew in the soul. He blew the soul into the body. Now that we're ensconced in this physical body, how are we going to understand godliness? How is that possible? So, this was his difficulty. And the answer that he was given was, tell Aaron to light up the menorah. Tell Aaron to kindle the souls. Tell Aaron to kindle the souls of the people by lifting them up. It's not simply kindling them, lighting them, but lighting them up. In other words, souls have to be lifted up. Once a soul clothed in the body is lifted up to its original source, it's lifted up to the source of light. It itself is light, but it's lifted up to the source of light because fire always burns upwards. Then you'll be able to understand how the soul can illuminate the world. But in order for that to happen, the soul has to be raised up. Now, this answers our question. First of all, the word Bereshit does not say, it's not preceded by, and God said Bereshit. Why? Because here we're talking about a level which is still concealed. It's still in God's mind, so to speak, rather than in speech. It hasn't become revealed yet. It's in a state of concealment. But that's the real origin. It's the origin of the soul. It's the origin of the candelabra. It's the origin of the Torah. All of them are still in a state of thought. It also is not followed by Vayhi Chen, and it was so, because when God created the world, as it says actually in the first utterance where it says, and God said, there shall be light, and it was, and it doesn't say, and it was so, but it's followed with the words, and there was light. God said, there shall be light, and there was light. The sages explain, the Zohar in particular, explain that the light that was to be was not the light that was manifested. The light that was to be was not the light that was manifested, it was hidden away. That light was concealed. Where was that light concealed? The original light that was intended to be revealed and will be revealed in the future. That light was concealed, hidden away in the Torah and in the soul. That's why the Torah is called Ner Mitzvah v'Torah Or. The mitzvah, the commandments, are a candle, and the Torah is a great light. The light is hidden in the Torah. It's also hidden in the soul. That's why also about the soul, it says, Ner Havai Nishmas Adam. God's candle is man's soul. Or you want to put it the other way, man's soul is God's candle. Okay. So that was where it was hidden. Aaron was told, when you light up the menorah, what you will be doing is you will be bringing that Vayhi Chen, and so it was, into reality. You will be, in other words, the original light that was hidden away, it was concealed in the Torah and in the soul, When you light up the souls, when you light up the candelabra, when you light up the souls, then you will see that the souls will in fact bear that original light. How do we know that? Let's look again at the verse where it says as follows: Vaya'as Cain Aharon. That same word Cain is there. Cain means yes, but it also means, and he did what he did what he was told to do about raising up the candles. Vaya'as Cain. So if you remember correctly, we said that the word Cain was not repeated after the word Bereshit. It wasn't even repeated after the word Yehi Or, after the utterance Yehi Or. There shall be light, and there was light, not Vayhi Cain. All the other 8 utterances, it says, and it was so. By light, it doesn't say, and it was so. And with Genesis, the first word, Bereshit, it also doesn't say, it does not say, Vayhi Cain, and so it was. When was the Vayhi Cain? The Vayhi Cain was when Aaron lit up the menorah. In other words, when he lit up people's souls. How did Aaron light up people's souls? Aaron was a person who actually, it says about him that he would be so delighted to see another person, and he was such a loving person that he automatically lit up other people's souls. He automatically lit them up. And that's to an extent what it means, that he made all the souls turn in towards the face of the menorah. What's the face of the menorah? The Pnei HaMenorah, the face of the menorah. Over here, the word face, Pnei HaMenorah, the face literally of the menorah, is the word Pnei, face, is the basis of the word Pnimiut, the inner dimension of the menorah. What did he do? He lifted souls up to their original face, their original place in thought, the pnimiut of the menorah, the inner dimension of the menorah, the inner dimension of the soul. So when Aaron lit up the menorah, he was lighting up souls so that their inner dimension of the soul would be able to shine through in other people. He did that not only when he lit the menorah, but he did that on a regular basis with everyone and everybody he met, and on every occasion. Don't forget, this was the time when Aaron lit the menorah, was just after his own children, his own sons had passed away, right? On the first day of inauguration, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was inaugurated for 8 days. On the 8th day, when it was supposed to be the final inauguration, and when the work was really, the divine service was really supposed to start in the tabernacle, the 2 sons of Aaron went into the holy part of the temple, of the tabernacle, and they brought an incense offering, which they were not commanded to bring, and unfortunately they passed away. Now, when it says that they passed away, it wasn't that they passed away in sin. God says over there, "Bikrovai ekadesh," I will be sanctified by those who are close to me. They came too close, and their souls left them and didn't come back. They were too close. They went too high too quickly, and they didn't come back. But this was the time, you can imagine, that Aaron was in a state of he just lost his 2 sons. He just lost his 2 beloved sons, and he had 4 sons, but nevertheless, he'd lost 2 of his sons, and they were very holy men, young men. And you can imagine the state of anguish that he might have been in. But Aaron, it says that Melamed Shaloshina, he didn't change anything. Even though he might have gotten emotional about the fact that he just lost his sons, or he might have gotten emotional about the fact that he was lighting up the souls of everybody as he was kindling the menorah, as he was lighting up the menorah. Nevertheless, he didn't change anything. Vayas Cain Aharon, Aaron did so, and he didn't change anything. He didn't change from what his divine service had to be. In other words, he went along the path that had been laid out for him, and he did what he had to do without any admixture of personal feelings and so on and so forth. So therefore, the message here, that I think this particular section brings out, the message that it brings out is that this is what we have to do. We have to kindle other people's souls. It's not up to us to describe other people's faults. Probably they know them better than we do. And even if they don't, the only way to go about it essentially is, yeah, I mean, even if that's what you want to do, you want to point out a fault, the best way to do it is to point out the better side of the person, and the fault disappears by itself. In other words, light up the darkness, kindle the menorah, kindle the soul, kindle another person. If a person can come away from a conversation with you, an interaction with you, can come away a little bit lighter, a little bit happier, a little bit more glowing, with a little bit more glow to him or her, then you will have achieved the goal. Criticism and putting people down and so on and so forth, and it's not going to do anything for you. It's not going to do anything for them. Aaron was also lifted up when he lit up the souls. In fact, the sages say in the plain, straightforward meaning of it, that he actually had to stand on a sort of a little 2-step or 3-step in order to reach the menorah and light it. He had to elevate himself on these steps, but that's just in the simple sense. In the more spiritual sense, as he lifted up other souls, as he lit them up, he himself was lifted up as well. And you'll find that when you light up another soul, you get lit up automatically as well. Not that that's necessarily the purpose, to lift yourself up, but the purpose is to lift up another person, and it happens automatically. Okay. What is meant by the future? Let me just answer a couple of questions over here. What is meant by the future? Does each piece of the soul light and completion is in the future when all parts are lit? So by lighting, we share the light. Yes, that's definitely true. By lighting, we do share the light. And don't forget, there are 7 branches to the menorah. There's 7 candles. And each branch is represents a different personality, a different personality type, a different type of person. And therefore, the idea is that you light the person up for who they are. And then all of them together form the menorah. You couldn't light just 1 candle or 2 candles. You had to light the whole thing. That was the way it was. That's one question. Second question, was that fortunate about the 2 sons of Aaron who passed away because they returned in Pinchas, in Phineas? Yes, that is actually correct. They did. Their souls came back into. Their souls come back and as a reincarnation in Pinchas. It actually might be a little bit different than a reincarnation. It could be that it was an ibur neshama. An ibur neshama is the impregnation of another soul into someone who's already living, who already has a soul, in order to lift them higher up, to raise them up to higher than than their own soul root. That's called ibur nishmat tzaddik. When the soul of a tzaddik, or whether living or no longer living, enters into the person and lifts that person up to beyond where they were capable of reaching themselves. Yeah, it could be that, there's certain commentaries that do look at the golden calf, the incident with the golden calf as punishment, that his 2 sons died as a punishment for the golden calf. There are commentaries that look at it that way, but in the Hasidic approach to things, you don't try and look at things from the negative point of view, from the point of view of punishments and so on and so forth. Yes, there are, of course, punishments mentioned in the Torah, but all punishments are not for the sake of punishment, of making the person grovel or whatever, but they're for the sake of tikkun. And when you're talking about such a lofty soul as Aaron, it would be preferable to understand it as a tikkun rather than a punishment, because that's the purpose of, punishments are not just punishments in the Torah. There's always the concept of rectification. And all right, so let's leave it at that. That's the way to look at it, in my opinion. But we would rather look at it from the point of view of Aaron having learned that souls need to be lifted up to their source, but still remain in the physical world. He understood that from his sons, that to leave the world is not the way things are supposed to be. The story is told in the Talmud, in the Gemara, the Talmudic tractate named Chagiga. The story is told of 4 sages who entered the orchard, entered the paradise that we mentioned before. In other words, they entered very, very lofty meditations on the Merkava, the divine chariot, so to speak. In other words, the vehicle through which godliness can be grasped, the various vehicles through which godliness can be grasped, called the chariot in sort of layman's terms, I suppose. The word Merkava also comes from the word Harkava. Harkava means to put things together like pieces of Lego. You'll be markiv pieces of Lego. If you're making something out of Lego, you would call it laharkivet hachalakim, to put together the pieces. So this putting together is actually also used, especially in the teachings of Rabbi Abraham Abulafia, who was a very early Kabbalist, one of the early Kabbalists, who used the methodology of the Sefer Yetzirah to put together letters and divine names and so on and so forth. So the concept of Harkava, the Merkava, it was also putting together permutations of divine names and letters in order to achieve something. Just like Bezalel put together the various elements using the various energies. In other words, the Hebrew letters each represents a different type of energy, 22 types of energy. And he put them all together and made one harmonious whole, just like the 22 main chromosomes, and then there's the 23rd, which is the overarching chromosome. And so he put them together in order to build the temple, in order to build it as a reflection. The tabernacle is a reflection of the creation, but a reflection of the creation actually from a higher level, because the tabernacle was, as I said before, was in the world of Atzilut rather than in the meditations behind the tabernacle on the world of Atzilut. The tabernacle itself was obviously in the physical world. In any event, why do we still use the word punishment instead of guidance, pointing us in a better direction? Well, yeah, I suppose you could ask the question, who uses that word? I try and avoid the word punishment. Guidance is definitely the way to understand it. Guidance and rectification, tikkun. That's probably the way to say it, I guess, because that's what we have gotten used to. We've gotten used to this way of thinking of people need to be punished. Well, if you have the right intentions when you say the word, in other words, you know what you mean by it, I suppose that you could still use the word, whatever. I think you understand what I mean. All right. Yeah, we are accountable for our actions, for sure. Yeah. And in fact, there's a whole lesson there that, basically, the expression in English, I think, is that we make the beds that we sleep in, that's the sort of modern expression. But the way the Torah says it is that I think we have to do a class on this. It's an important thing that there's a whole teaching that it's based on the whole story when the prophet goes to David and he says to him, the prophet Nathan says to David, he gives him this whole parable of there was a rich man took away the sheep of a poor man, and so on and so forth. And then he tells him, well, you're the man. In other words, well, why did he do it like that? So the Baal Shem Tov explains a beautiful explanation that a person is always given a situation where he, she judges themselves. There's no judgment from heaven. There's no punishment from heaven. You are the one that punish yourself. You are the one that, it's a whole, we should really go into it sometime. It's really worth looking at that story, that incident, and deriving the lesson that the Baal Shem Tov derives from it, which is that because of God's compassion, essentially, which we should reflect, if we judge other people favorably, then we're really judging ourselves favorably, because we're passing judgment on ourselves all the time, and we only get midah keneged midah. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, midah keneged midah, measure for measure, as Shakespeare called it in his famous play, Measure for Measure. But that's a rabbinical expression which is found in the Talmud, midah keneged midah. Measure for measure. And it says, yeah, we can change the sheets on the bed that we made. Yeah, that we make. Yeah, you can change the sheets. You can even change the bed. Sleep on a new bed. Who says they have to sleep on the same bed? You can change the place where you sleep. You can change the direction. You can change the. In fact, that is one of the bits of Kabbalistic advice, like how you place your bed, where you sleep. Do you sleep north-south, or do you sleep east-west? There's a whole discussion on that in Kabbalah, like which you should do. And Karen says, yes, you should not sleep, but you should instead wake up. Exactly. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. That's the proper observation. Yes, we should all wake up. That's right. Do I have any sets of videos organized in the Pasha already anywhere? I don't. I really should organize the channel in that particular way. I don't really know how to do it. If anyone knows how to do it, if they could drop me an email of how to do that, then I can organize it, or get someone to organize it for me, maybe. And oh wow. I mean, we have quite a lot of videos on the channel. I'm not always sure that I demarcate exactly which parsha they go along, but I could always let you know if you have any difficulty with. Thank you for volunteering. I appreciate it very much. That would be great. I'm not even sure that YouTube allows you to do that kind of thing. Does it? I'm not sure. I mean, I would imagine that it should, but I don't know if it does. All right, we'll have to look into it. Oh, it does. Well, thank you. Learning everything. You can create playlists. That's what they are. Yeah, I should get into these things more, All right, excellent. So are there any other questions, folks? I should let you go ahead. You don't need me. I could. I should keep making the videos. Yes, I will. Sure. Actually, I've been thinking maybe I'll ask your advice. Everybody, what do you think? I have been thinking of, in addition to these longer form videos where it's sort of more or less a class on a topic, I've been thinking of making shorter, more, like Prager University videos, like 5-minute videos, or 5, 6, 7 minutes, or whatever it is, on shorter topics as sort of introductory. And I'll just post them. Maybe we'll have to make a special, what's it called again? A playlist. Yeah, we'll make a playlist for shorter videos that'll be more sort of introductory and explanatory of basic principles in Kabbalah. And the Miller isn't that have something to do with beer? The Miller Minute. Okay. That sounds great. Okay. Right, the healthy millennium. Yeah, go ahead, Justin, please ask. Shoot. I was wondering about it because the command to bring the materials is mentioned and the text moves into Menorah pointing the architects, but the materials are brought up again. To mention too much is brought, just curious. Because there was too much. There was too much material. Well, people donated basically of the possessions that they had, that they'd actually gotten from the Egyptians, because in order to encourage the Israelites to leave Egypt, get out, take whatever you want. Yeah, take this gold vessel, that silver canteen, whatever it was, and they try to get them out. Try to get them out. So that's where they got all that wealth. I mean, they were slaves. Where did they get wealth from? That's where they got it from the Egyptians, who were trying to get them out of there as soon as possible. Take this and go. In any event, so when they donated to the tabernacle, they donated so much that it was too much for there was too much already. So the word came out, okay, time to stop giving, because we have more than enough already. Before the final Exodus, we will leave with even more. Yeah. I'm not sure about physical wealth, but surely, hopefully spiritual wealth. Physical wealth is fine too. Not complaining. I just think it means that generally that we don't have to amass physical wealth. We amass knowledge and experience and understanding and wisdom, particularly wisdom. Because the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and information and wisdom, I mean, you can see that, the information age is upon us, but the wisdom age is yet to happen, as we can see. Paula likes the idea of short videos. Yeah, okay, so I will think about how to do them, and perhaps I could consult with a few of you who are good at this kind of stuff. The light of your day. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate I appreciate your appreciation. Thank you. All right, folks. Have a great weekend, great week, and see ya. How do I say? If I don't see you through the window, I'll see you through. How does it say? I don't see you through the week. I'll see you through the window. Okay, whatever. All right. All the best, everybody. Have a good one. And again, any questions, just drop me a line. Alrighty. Shabbat shalom. Good. Short videos. Excellent. I will get working on them. Good. All the best.